Almost 4 weeks have passed since the evening when my 20-year-old son told me he was headed to a protest downtown. I went with him. I was moved into the street by the passion of very young adults, the one in my household and the hundreds, perhaps thousands, I saw on the streets of our city that late May evening. I will confess, I was nervous, but only about coronavirus. I saw no weapons. I witnessed no vandalism, no violence. What I did experience was a tremendous amount of raw anger, even rage. The cause we all know was the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer, abetted by both active and silent accomplices. The video and that murder come on the heels of countless extrajudicial executions of Black Americans, often at the hands of police. We know the names: Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor. America's conscience should have been shocked into the streets years ago, and in some places, for a time, it has been. This time seems to be different. This video, this murder, has even shaken our own usually quiescent city into the streets. I joined in some of the chants, but remained silent when the words were profane or inappropriate. I understood, though, why some protesters were shouting words I would not. When my sons got their driver's licenses, I was thrilled, not terrified as Black parents are that a broken taillight could prove fatal. I am angry about unchecked police brutality, but my righteous indignation cannot be compared to the anger of a people who have repeatedly grieved and who have repeatedly demanded justice and who have repeatedly seen justice denied. When the crowd walked down the embankment to block I-630, I decided that the time had come for me to go home. But I did not disagree with the tactic. Even the Confederate monuments on the Capitol grounds pale in comparison to the way that Black citizens of our city view that freeway as a symbol of systemic racism. Before the night was over, Robert would be shot with chemical irritants and rubber bullets. His crime? Kneeling on the ground in a line of protesters peacefully facing down the state police in front of the Capitol. He did not wear his wound as a badge of victimhood or honor. Black lives are on the line, not his. Years ago, some of our Christian neighbors wore bracelets, reminding them to ask, what would Jesus do? Jews struggled for a parallel. The theologically correct answer is, what would God have us do? The popular response was, what would Moses do? This week's Torah portion gives us a glimpse into what Moses would do. Moses is faced with protesters. A band of rebels led by his own cousin rise up against Moses. Their claim, all the community are holy. All of them, and Adonai is in their midst. Why then do you, Moses and Aaron, raise yourselves up above the congregation of Adonai? In short, it's a power struggle. Moses is bereft, but quickly he collects himself and he issues a challenge. Whomever Adonai chooses shall be the Holy One. Drama ensues. In the end, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the rebels together with their households. What are we to make of this story? Is rebellion wrong? Our sages note that these rebels have no cause. Though they claim to want power for all the people, they are actually interested in high office only for themselves. For rebels with a cause, we look to next week's portion. The people rise up because they have no water. God provides a ready solution, instructing Moses to speak to a rock at which point God promises water will flow. Moses, though, loses control. He loudly reprimands the people and smashes his rod on the rock. The water flows, but the punishment for Moses and his brother is severe. This time, God does not punish the rebels, but Moses and Aaron, who will die in the wilderness, never reaching the promised land. The lesson seems to be, when people have a righteous cause for rebellion, give them what they seek. If they are thirsty, provide water. If they are hungry, feed them. If they need medical care, get them to a doctor, and do not ask questions about ability to pay. If they have no home, provide shelter. And if it's justice they lack in a nation with a 400-year legacy of white supremacy, then justice will need to roll down like waters, righteousness like a mighty stream. Torah's rebels, even those with a cause, do not behave well. Thirsty and despairing, they whine. Why have you brought us, the congregation of Adonai, into the wilderness for us and our beasts to die here? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? Only then do they get to the heart of the matter. There is not even water to drink. No, America's protesters in the last month have not always behaved well. A minority broke windows, looted, set fires, assaulted police. In the spring of 1968, a month before he was assassinated, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King admitted that we have lived over these last 2 or 3 summers with agony, and we have seen our cities going up in flames. He reaffirmed, I would be the first to say that I am still committed to militant, powerful, massive nonviolence as the most potent weapon in grappling with the problem from a direct action point of view. But, he continued, it is not enough for me to stand before you tonight and condemn riots. I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility than about justice and humanity. Will this summer be the turning point? This week, the New York Times reported, the sustained outcry over George Floyd's death has compelled many white Americans to acknowledge the anti-black racism that is prevalent in the United States, and to perhaps even examine their own culpability for it. It is as though the ability of white people to collectively ignore the everyday experience of black people has been short-circuited, at least for now. With Dr. King, we abhor the violence committed by a minority of protesters, often not even by demonstrators, but by those who would take advantage of the protest atmosphere. But like Dr. King, let us acknowledge that riots happen because people perceive themselves powerless, unheard. Therefore, let us hear. Therefore, let us act. And therefore, let each of us find our own ways to heed and even join these rebels with a cause. Then, may we heal America together.